to Zoom with Czarny and welcome back. It's been a little bit since I've been able to get one of these out, but I'm trying to get back on my schedule as March was a very busy month for us. But here we are in April. And I'm hoping I can get back on my thrice weekly schedule. And I'm honored to bring to you my conversation with Joanna Zdanys of the Brennan Center. We have a great conversation about the public campaign finance system. It was recorded a little over a month ago, and I haven't been able to get it up until now. So I apologize to her and I apologize to you, but it's still a timely subject because as we're finishing up the petition season here in New York, we're going to start to see who's actually going to be taking part in this campaign finance season, this new campaign finance system, as they have to file petitions to actually be candidates and receive money in the system. So it's a great thing, a great conversation to have. Just brief things that are going on at the Board of Elections. We just finished up our presidential primary. That was Tuesday. And as I said, we're also in the middle of petition week. Petition week is how we get candidates in New York and put them on the ballot. And so all over New York for state offices, for county offices, they are trying to get on the ballot by filing petitions today. As I'm recording this was the last day for petitions, but people could still mail in their petitions. So really we won't know the true races till Monday. And then of course we go through the challenge period over the next 2 weeks. So some of the races that we think there may be primaries may not end up being primaries as well. So stay tuned for my Zoom with Czarny or my commissioner card on Monday, and we'll go over all of that. But now, without further delay, I'd like to bring you my conversation with Joanna Zdanys of the Brennan Center, and we're talking about the New York Campaign Finance Program. Enjoy. And we're back, and I'm so happy to have my good friend Joanna Zdanys. She is the senior counsel for the Brennan Center of Justice, and she and I. Well, Joanna, this is your third time on Zoom with Czarny, right? And
welcome back.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. And you and I have actually not just done this program 3 times. I think we've testified together in New York State on the same panel for the local government budget hearings each of the last 3 years, or 3 out of the last 4, something like that. And so we've gotten to know each other with that. And of course, your work with Brennan Center, but thanks for coming back on Zoom with Czarny.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So happy to be back. And thanks for all the work that you do, including bringing the latest in New York democracy and elections work to your viewers.
That's what we try to do here. And but I know you've been on a few times, but some people are probably watching this, they haven't seen it before. So Joanna, tell us a little bit about yourself and your work with Brennan Center.
Yeah, so I am an attorney at the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU School of Law, which is a nonpartisan law and policy institute focused on strengthening and protecting our systems of democracy across the country. So the Brennan Center's work is national. We do a lot of state level work as well. And the reason why you and I know each other so well is because a lot of my work personally focuses on election reform in New York State.
So I don't know if I've told you this before, but Brennan Center is like kind of one of those things, one of the iconic groups in my mind, because as I was growing up as an election worker, and also as an advocate, I relied on the Brennan Center and the website, and especially in the fights about voter ID. The voter ID portion of your website is wonderful with resources, and there's all kinds of topics on the website. So I'm always happy to work with Brennan Center anytime you give me a call because it's like, one of my heroes, and one of my formative groups. So if you're, I'll put it in the show notes, the website, please just peruse through some of the topics they have on there. They're on the right side of everything, and I really appreciate the work you do as well. But we got some new things going on in New York. I mean, we always seem to have new things going on in New York. And one of the things that when you and I testified earlier last month on this, I was asking for money for local county boards, but you had a great focus on the new public campaign finance system. And that's what we've talked about before, but let's remind people, because we're in it right now. This
Yeah.
is, we've been talking about this as a theoretical thing for a few years, but now we're in it. But remind the viewers, what is New York's public campaign finance?
Yeah, so New York's public campaign finance program is a voluntary fundraising option for candidates for state office. So candidates who are running for statewide offices, including governor, lieutenant governor, AG, and comptroller, and then state legislative offices, so Senate and Assembly, have the option to enroll in this program and have their small contributions from constituents matched at a multiple rate with public dollars. This is right on time. We're in this era where elections are increasingly expensive, and just a small handful of wealthy donors really drown out everybody else in our election system. And so, this is a problem across the country. We've seen it on the federal level, how a tiny number of ultra wealthy donors really have such great sway and such a great share of political giving. And the same is true in New York State. Back in the 2022 elections, just 200 wealthy donors gave more than all 206,000 small donors in our state combined. And that is not what a healthy democracy looks like. But the public campaign finance program is responsive to that program. It gives candidates an alternative to the status quo and allows them to power their campaigns on the support of the constituents that they're seeking to represent. So it is live for the first time for the 2024 legislative elections, which is really exciting. This stands to be really a transformative moment, not just for New York politics, but also it stands to be a really powerful model for other parts of the country, and indeed also the federal government to follow.
So New York is handling this by, starting this program. And we've been talking about it in theory for the last couple of years, but now people are starting to sign up, or they've been signing up for quite some time. But how did the governor's proposed budget? Now, we're taping this a couple of weeks ago. When this is aired, though the budget will not have been passed yet, unless there's some miracle in New York that they actually pass it before the April 1st deadline, which they won't. But how did the governor's budget treat public campaign financing?
The governor's budget really made a strong statement of support for this program. She provided $114.5 million for public campaign financing. That included $14.5 million for the Public Campaign Finance Board, which is the agency that oversees the program, housed within the State Board of Elections, provides them the funds that they need to operate the program and provide candidates with the materials and assistance that they need to participate. And her budget also provided $100 million for the matching funds that go to candidates. This, in our estimation, amounts to essentially fully funding the program for its first run. And, we're very hopeful that our state's legislative leaders will also match that amount, and that we can hope to see that funding in the final state budget.
Now, there was some interesting happenings around the public campaign finance at the end of last year. There was a bill that was supported by the legislature where the governor vetoed. This is actually, it doesn't happen often that the governor vetoes a bill supported by overwhelmingly supported by both chambers. Tell us what was, what was that bill? What did it do? Why did the governor veto it? And I believe Brennan Center supported that veto. And why did you?
Yeah, so late last session, in the final days of session, the state legislature introduced and passed legislation that would have made substantial changes to the public financing program. The major one that the Brennan Center opposed was one that would change the way that the program matches small donations. So currently, as it was originally enacted, the program matches only small contributions of $250 or less from constituents. But the contribution limits that candidates can actually fundraise up to in New York State are much higher. They're as high as $18,000 per cycle for a statewide candidate, for example. And what this bill would have done is it would have allowed the first $250 of even a maximum contribution up to the full contribution limit to be multiplied and matched at a multiple rate with public funds. And that truly would have run contrary to the spirit of this program. It was intended to magnify the voices of small donors, folks in our state who can only give a small amount to campaigns and whose voices have been drowned out of the political system for such a long time. This bill would have essentially added public funds to even huge maxed out contributions, which, from the Brennan Center perspective is just truly not sound policy. And so we think it was the right move for Governor Hochul to veto this bill. And we're hopeful that the program will continue, with this 250 only match going forward.
So people have been signing up, but we've just reached kind of a milestone, right? It's the last the time frame to signing up just passed, and there was a little bit of surge. And at the time of taping this is the end of February. This won't air for a couple of weeks, and we'll know the final number then, and maybe I'll be able to add it into the intro. But what are we looking at here? I mean, how popular is this program?
This program is proving to be immensely popular among candidates across the state, across both sides of the aisle, really throughout the political spectrum in urban, rural, and suburban counties. So today we have seen, by my last count, 327 candidates sign up for the program. That is well more than half of the total number of candidates who ran for office in 2022. And so, the Public Campaign Finance Board, as I understand it, is, finishing up processing those last applications that have trickled in. And so we'll know by the time our conversation airs what the final number is. But it is just really incredible to see how much enthusiasm there's for the program, including, a very strong showing of current office holders, members of both the Senate and the Assembly who have signed up and are looking to power their campaigns over the coming year on the support of small donor constituents.
So, we kind of mentioned this, but I don't know if we put it explicitly into the podcast. Which candidates can take advantage of that this year? It's just the Senate and Assembly candidates, because there are no statewide offices. There is senator up, but that's a federal office. So Senate candidates cannot take advantage of that, or can they?
Right, so this program just covers state elected offices. So the four statewide of governor, lieutenant governor, comptroller, and attorney general, and then the two legislative offices of Senate and Assembly. And so for the 2024 elections, those are the Senate and the Assembly are the only offices that can receive matching funds in this current year. But the program is live for statewide offices as well. Of course, it's a little bit earlier for folks who are campaigning in 2026, to be
Well,
fully
it's never
standing
early
next
to
year right
campaign. I think
now.
there's a lot of people out there campaigning for 2026 already. But I hear your point.
Yeah, well, I mean, to your point, so there is one statewide candidate, the comptroller, Tom DiNapoli, has already signed up to participate in the program. But, my point was more that I would hope and expect that there will be more coming as we edge closer to the 2026 elections.
I'm glad to hear that Comptroller DiNapoli signed up, because his office was the first. Wasn't that the pilot office was the comptroller's race a few years back? Not this last time. No, yeah,
Mhm.
this last no,
It
the time
was,
before. It
there
was
was
18.
some, I think it may have been 2014. All the years kind of blend together in our advocacy work. But yeah, it was, in previous push for public financing to be enacted in New York State, there was not the back in 2014, you know, our state's leaders got achingly close to sealing the deal on public campaign financing, but it didn't go all the way through. So, what came to pass in those elections, or sorry, in that effort, was a pilot program for state comptroller, which then fizzled out. It didn't stay on the books since it was a pilot.
That's right. Oh, it was 2014, and the reason I remember that is Onondaga County Comptroller at the time, Robert Antonacci, was challenging DiNapoli, and he took advantage of the program back then in 2014. So we were, that's my county. It was pretty interesting to see a Republican taking advantage of the program. But he then became state senator in 18, and then a Supreme Court justice in 2019. So it's been so he's now in his cocoons. But it's just interesting because that's a tie back to Onondaga County, had some of the pioneers of public campaign finance, and a Republican at that. Right? And you did say it's bipartisan. Are you seeing any kind of partisan lean to the signups, or is it even, or how's that going right now?
We'll have to look at the final numbers as they shake out, but it has been really great to see candidates from both the Democratic and the Republican Party have been opting in very strong numbers, and really representing the geographic diversity of the state. By our last count, roughly 3/4 of the state's legislative districts were represented by participants in the program. So that really goes to show that this is a reform that's being embraced by folks from, many different walks of life, many different backgrounds. And I think, it speaks to a desire among candidates, and also, from the voters who have really wanted this reform in place for so long. This is, a really great tool that has no real political bent in a partisan way. It's truly something that can work for Democrats and Republicans alike.
It's awesome to hear, because we've been fighting the fight on early voting and early voting by mail, and it's gotten way too partisan, where one side believes in it and the other side doesn't. I really hope that public campaign finance becomes that, right out of the gate, a bipartisan tool, because that's what it should be, right? I mean, we're not here to help one side or the other. We're here to help any candidate wanting to run for office there, doesn't want to rely on corporate or special interest money, and that's good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, the Brennan Center is nonpartisan, so
Right.
of course we don't have a dog in that fight one way or the other. But, one other aspect of that I'd like to lift up too is that, it's kind of intuitive to think of this as a reform for candidates and how they campaign, but it's also about how voters participate, and how they feel like they have skin in the game or not. And so, under the status quo or, pre-public campaign financing, someone with $10 to give to a candidate might say, why bother? What does this have to do with anything? But, for a legislative candidate, for example, small donations up to $50 are matched at a 12-to-1 rate. And so that person's $10 would be matched with $120 in public matching funds and become worth $130 to the campaign. Really, changing the dynamics, kind of incentivizing participation by, interested voters, and by the same token, incentivizing candidates to engage with them more. But we are really excited at the Brennan Center about public campaign financing as a tool for increased civic engagement. We've seen different programs across the country, that have come up over the years. We think, New York's is by far, the most, the strongest and most ambitious program we've seen enacted anywhere, particularly post Citizens United. But even looking at the benefits that we've seen in other jurisdictions, there are a lot of reasons to believe that this is going to have a really significant impact in New York. So just looking at Seattle's public financing program, which, operates on a different model, than New York's states in terms of, its structure and how it functions, the spirit is still the same. And there was a study back in October 2023 that found that city's public financing program had actually contributed to an increase in voter turnout. So, all of these facets of our democracy are related. And so when you engage folks early on in the political process, I think we can hope and expect that they would also be more likely to engage throughout the election cycle as well.
So obviously we're in the infancy of the program. It's the first year. So I know the standard answer to this is we'll see. But what do you think is the future of the public campaign finance? Is there talk, even in its infancy, to expanding this beyond just the halls of Albany into local campaigns and local, city council races or county legislature races, or, because I mean, it's great for these assembly and senate candidates, but most of them probably have some resources to raise money on their own. And a lot of people that are just starting off as first-time candidates, fundraising such a huge burden for them. And is there any talk about someday looking to expand this to local offices?
Yeah, I love that question, because it also, it gives me great hope. We love to see these programs proliferate, and we do find, in other parts of country where there's kind of proof of concept in one area, more programs crop up nearby. A great example is the counties around Washington, D.C. and Washington, D.C. itself. We've seen, Howard County, Montgomery County, Prince George's, Baltimore County have all implemented public campaign financing. Here in New York State, that would be implemented by local governments and a local law would be passed. So, hope springs eternal that more local jurisdictions will be interested in this. This is something that, Suffolk County had previously done. Suffolk County passed a public financing program back in 2017. But when there was turnover in the county council, there was later a vote basically to take down the program, citing to budget reasons. But, this is politics always has a hand in these things, unfortunately. But Suffolk County's program may be gone, but we hear from folks that we talk to across the state that this is something that voters want to see. And I will say, the Brennan Center is part of the Fair Elections for New York Coalition, and I've had a lot of conversations, with my partners in the coalition, with different groups across the state. And when we talk about public financing at the state level, a question we always get is, well, like, can we get that for our county legislature? Can we get that for our town council? Like, what's possible? And so, we're really excited to see New York's program be, a proof of concept for other jurisdictions to follow, across the country, but also right here on a smaller level in New York. And of course, New York City has had one of the nation's premier public campaign financing programs for more than 30 years now. And a lot of, the sort of building blocks of that program are reflected and sort of, modernized in the New York State program.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there, and I hope so too. I hope other jurisdictions sign on. I get a little worried though that is for waiting for local governments to make this decision. Local governments who get elected in the old system of, well, you get nothing. I think sometimes I get worried that they won't reform themselves, so to speak, and that there could have to be state action or to compel that into that, or at least state funds that they could tap into, and not just local funds. That's my concern. I'm all for the program. I think it's great. I don't want to see it replicated everywhere. My concern is that outside of some of the more progressive jurisdictions, we will have a severe resistance, and those are the places where people who are truly trying to run for office for the first time are up against incumbents that have flush with cash with county vendors or city vendors that keep people from rising up and challenging the races. So I hope that there's more of a, but we'll have to see how the program, right? I mean, if the program works great and people get elected, I think hopefully we'll be able to see more will to continue to expand it.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's just impossible to extract the politics from the whole mix of, how these programs get passed. And I hear you. And I mean, the issue of local funding, I know, is one that impacts your work and many facets of our local democracy. So.
Well, so we're kind of coming towards the golden time of these podcasts, but are there any other things that Brennan Center is working on right now that you would like people to kind of take a look at? Maybe some highlights of stuff that other things that Brennan Center is working on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I certainly can't claim credit for a lot of what I'm about to mention, but the Brennan Center has a really unique advocacy model in that we are part think tank, part sort of public interest law firm, and part communications hub. So we do really in-depth research, publish reports. We help craft and pass policies, and then we fight to defend them in court. And of course, engage with the broader public through the media, through conversations with folks like you and on this podcast. So that's just a little bit more about the Brennan Center and kind of how we do our work. It's 2024, and we are laser focused on ensuring that this year's elections are free and fair across the country. And there are a lot of hurdles to overcome with that. We have seen in recent years, for one example, just tons of voter suppressive legislation being passed in state legislatures across the country. And so members of our voting rights team work to fight back against those efforts. And we will be keeping a close eye on that throughout the year to come. Rolling up our sleeves and diving in when necessary. We're also increasingly focused on the role that generative AI will play in our democracy. A number of my colleagues and I are focused on, legislative efforts across the country to make sure that voters know what they're seeing in campaign materials when they see it. And another really interesting body of work that some of my colleagues have been working on involves a proliferation in threats to sitting office holders and the dangers that they find. We are living in a time where the folks who are holding elected office, but also, as we've seen across the country, the folks who are helping to run elections are doing so under very serious threats, which really takes it's a threat to really the bedrock of our democracy. So those are issues that we are really focused on bringing more public attention to, addressing through legislation where available. All have a role in strengthening our democratic process, not just, for the 2024 cycle ahead, but beyond as well.
That's awesome. All good work. And I want to thank you for the work you do and the work Brennan Center does. I always like to end the question, end the podcast with my ending question, which is, what haven't we talked about? What is there something that you'd like to highlight that we haven't talked about yet, or whether it's with the public campaign finance program or anything else, or even personal news, whatever you'd like to talk about. If you want to talk about your dog, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I appreciate the invitation to dish. I will just say, and I think this might be the thing that I always say when you ask me this question, but it doesn't stop being true, is that it's very easy to look at the news cycle and everything going on across the country in our political system and to feel pessimistic about it. But there is a lot that we can achieve together if there is a will to do it. And there is a lot of good work that is happening every day to make our democracy fairer. And so I don't want folks to lose sight of that, especially at times when it can feel really challenging. We're seeing tremendous strides, even just here in New York over the last few years, with public campaign financing, with the enactment of the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act of New York, with the shift of certain local elections from odd years to even years to help boost voter turnout in those. And of course, the implementation of early voting and Golden Day, same day registration. I think those are all things that are helping to get us closer to a stronger democracy in New York.
Well, Joanna, thank you again for coming on Zoom and Czarny. Look at the show notes, find out where you can find out more about Brennan Center and follow them on social medias. Joanna, I look forward to working with you in the coming legislative session. We still got a lot of work to do. Even once this budget's done, there's a lot of bills to get passed, but also I just look forward to working with Brennan Center and yourself on all of the different issues. So thank you so much for coming on Zoom and Czarny.
Great, always a pleasure. Thanks so much.
And that was my conversation with Joanna Zdanys of the Brennan Center, and a great conversation about the new New York campaign finance system. I am trying to get back on my thrice weekly schedule. Today will be my Zoom and Czarny. This weekend, I will do a weekly walk on the village elections that happened on March 19th. recapping Baldwinsville, Fayetteville, and Manoa. There's some interesting statistics in there, so I hope you tune in for that. Next week on Monday, I will be doing Commissioner in a Car again, recapping the presidential primary and also the petition filing week that we just had for designating petitions. My Zoom with Czarny next week will be with Kai Wharton of Citizen Action, and we'll be talking a lot about the campaign finance system that is in full effects right now. So check it out. And then, of course, next week's weekly walk, it may be Wednesday, it may be on the weekend, depends on when I get time to do it, but we'll be talking about the presidential primary, early voting, and absentee voting, and how we participated in that primary. So go to dustinzarny.com and you can subscribe and get an email notice anytime I put something up, whether it's an interview or content or election news. So check it out. And thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.